Hey guys, welcome to Cafe IO. Cafe IO में आपका स्वागत है. For some time, I have stopped doing content. It's been about 3 months and I'm recording after 3 months now. Why is that? That is because I realized that I was doing too short form content, even though they were not shorts, but I was doing videos of about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And when I all started this, the intent was to share what I have learned in my journey. And then I got carried away with a little bit of views and all of that, and then I realized that I should pause down a little. So I am now going to step in a different direction and do more long form content. This is not another podcast that you're going to see, but rather more deep dive content about 30 minutes long, so that I can cover a topic in depth rather than trying to squeeze something within 30 minutes. This is the first of the series. I'll try to do a video every week, if not two, as I used to. Hope you enjoy this content. Today's video is all about developers. So if you're a developer or be it in space, I would say developers slash builders, analysts who write SQL, UI developers, designers, broad category. That category, there's a significant amount of flux around how the market is going to look like with so much of AI and generative AI in. So this video is all about how can builders use generative AI and large language models to improve their life, and how can they use to speeden up their work. Let's dive in. Okay, so how does generative AI help developers? Essentially, the outcomes that it can influence is speed, quality and creativity. इसका क्या मतलब होता है? Speed means usually जब आप कुछ development कर रहे हैं, let's say you are trying to write a new piece of software, make some enhancements, whether it's a UI or a data science project, or it's a simple backend project. Okay, not simple backend project, गलती से निकल गया. But be it starting from the creative side of it, which is the UI aspects of software development, to complex backend development, to deployment, and then fundamentally further down the road testing as well. There's a whole life cycle, and all of these areas can be influenced by generative AI. कैसे? देखते हैं. So one of the most common thing that we have seen is autocomplete, right? Code auto-completion is not new and it has been happening for years. Initially it was a couple of lines of suggestions, but now it's complete generation of code. Now on top of code completion, you have a lot of code generation nowadays. This is not just standard boilerplate code. This is UI components, this is CRUD, this is API endpoints, and essentially you use simple English. Like, give me a SQL that can filter users by age. Then what will happen is ChatGPT or whatever you're using, and we'll take a look at most and a lot of tools today. They will be able to tell by looking at your schema as to what's the right query to do. Another example could be there's a project and a code space present, and something like a GitHub Copilot will scan your entire code base, and then it will be able to tell you that you should make a modification or refactor this code a certain way, all of that. It will give you a suggestion and you can accept it or reject it. You can write unit test cases and things like that. So there's a lot of generation and completion loops that are possible, but again there are challenges which we will see going forward. Testing and debugging बहुत natural है, very very straightforward. What does it mean? When you write some code, you obviously need to test it. So you can get to some sort of a state where it can write your unit test cases, for instance. It can do injections for you. It can, do cross-testing, sequels, data queries, insert sample records and things like that for testing. Where does it help in debugging? A lot of scenarios require you to be aware of other modules, and given that these agents, and I've talked a lot about these agents in my previous videos. If you have not subscribed to my channel or if you have not seen previous videos, I've talked a lot of content about large language models, machine learning, MLOps, cloud engineering, and how to use LLMs into your day-to-day, how are LLMs working, different LLMs and all of that. Do check it out. If you like my content, subscribe kar lo yaar. So debugging, right? When some element, let's say an AI agent in this case, is aware of your entire code base And it is important to know that in most cases of software development, the entire code base is not written by one person. In fact, most people are working on a set of modules or a module, or sometimes even certain specific classes. Or if it's an enhancement, you might not have even seen it. So having a buddy, having somebody is like having an SME with you who's aware of the entire code base. It is very much possible that these things are limited and constrained by token lengths, the LLM use, your organization policy, and in general. But generally speaking, large language models and AI have gotten really good helping suggest testing scenarios and also being able to suggest debugging scenarios. So it can suggest you fixes, it can generate test coverages, edge cases, all of that. We'll see most of these in action. Documentation and comments is probably the most easiest thing. It can summarize the code. Let's say you have written a code, it can add one line of comment before each. If you want to generate a flowchart of the code, it can do that. It can generate README, it can generate Git comments, commit messages, what else? It's just, there's a large amount of documentation scenarios that can be covered very easily with generative AI. And let's say if you are a SaaS provider or an enterprise customer, you have enterprise customers, what will happen is they are using your platform or product, and there is always a need to have a good quality documentation. You can have an agent scan through your entire code base and again, generate documentation. You will need to do initial validation, one-time human being validation, but that's very doable, and it can save significant amount of time. It can speeden up your delivery cycles by generating just documentation. A lot of people, when we talk about documentation and giving code to generative AI, people are like, oh, OpenAI is going to use my code, learn it, all of that. I think there are two sides to this conversation. One is how you protect and safeguard yourself. If you work with trusted providers like Microsoft, AWS, where they give you virtual instances of these models, inferenced or custom deployed models, then essentially it's like any other ML model, just huge, deployed specific to your organization. For example, Microsoft has OpenAI Private, which is like dedicated to you kind of a way. Again, then it goes to on further, whether you trust these companies or not, that goes on to a different path. But as far as developer productivity is concerned, this is immensely helpful. The other part of the story is you can actually have smaller models like like Llama Coder and these models, which are open source models. The fine-tuned version or the smaller model version, which is called SLMs, run even locally. I've done a video on how to run a small language model locally. You can check that out it was by using Ollama and LM Studio. Both products can let you download small language models, use it locally, and again, no context is ever passed. So you can use all of these tools and capabilities to significantly influence the amount of documentation generation cycles, which are really tedious, monotonous, and well, nobody wants to do it. What's up next? Code review and optimization, right? A lot of times what happens is we know how to code, obviously we should. And when I say no, it's not a capability question, it's more of, the scenario is complicated, we don't know the dynamics, but somehow we have pieced together the requirement of how to code and what to code and, be able to put that in. Then what happens is when you are ready, unless and until you have a very large team, you are constrained by who is going to do a peer review, who's going to help me optimize the code. Because my thought process was to be functionally correct. It isn't essentially to be most optimal in the first pass, right? I'll eventually get there as I do unit testing, load testing, and stuff like that. Here, generative AI and LLMs are really good, I would say, because they are aware of and have been trained on public repositories. So they have good knowledge of best practices in terms of software development and what is optimized code looks like. So if you give, let's say a ChatGPT a piece of code base, a function, and essentially say that, hey, help me make this more Pythonic or make this more optimal, give this in a parallel processing scenario, all of that works really well. You want to do code smells, you can look at different anti-patterns, you can look at performance issues. You can also flag potential security flaws, which is something very difficult for an individual developer to do. Again, that is because most of these engines are also aware of CIS and those different sort of guidelines around code security. So it's really fundamentally baked into it when they do a code review and optimization. So again, a very interesting use case. Refactoring and migration, right? There's a lot of instances where organizations are trying to move from technology A to technology B, or a version A to version B, monolith to microservices, and these projects have been all extremely complex in my experience. So let's say you have a manufacturing project or an energy project, and you're working with a customer that has a extremely large code base, and that code base essentially factors in I don't know, some earlier version of Java, and you want to chalk some of them out, draw it out into more service oriented design, probably have few microservices, do data analytics in Python and stuff like that. This would require significant manpower in general, and when you augment large language models and their ability to process large code bases and their awareness of programming language, this can really be helpful. You can extract actually what is written as business logic even before trying to rewrite it, because most people are afraid to touch it. So a lot of documentation things, what I already covered, can be done on top of those code bases, and then fundamentally it can be used to take a legacy code base and migrate to modern standards. It could be even modern to modern, like you want to move from Python to TypeScript for more UI centric work, things like that. So refactoring and migration is again significantly boosted by these scenarios. Finally, from a developer perspective, right, we've talked about the code base, all of that, but how do we do beyond that, right? If there's always the notion of upskilling. If you imagine these assistants to be great tutors, you will find that you can ask it anything about a certain language. In most cases, if you have paid versions of them, or even free instances allow you to do that, give a citation like, hey, this is the library, scan it, what does it do, tell me, here's my code base, can I use this library? Those sort of scenarios, I can't tell you how many times I have done. Specifically, if you're working in a startup, experimenting, trying to do different libraries, do optimize for certain scenarios and things like that. You can, let's say you have a API documentation and then you want to generate synthetic data for it, like 50 different parameters, different query patterns, different sort of methods. You can just give it your API spec, which you could have used a large language model to generate, and then do get the sample data for it. Now all of this also sounds a little scary, so let me address that elephant in the room. I think LinkedIn is flooded, and this is something that I keep talking about when I do hiring, when I talk to young devs and things like that. So there is a class of people or a group of people who are, let's say, anti LLM, that AI cannot write code. And then there is another class that is like, all jobs are going away in the next 6 months. I don't think the world is divided that way. I think it's somewhere in the middle, slowly shifting towards that a lot of code can be written by AI, but it's not that all code can be written by AI. Now, why are the people who say that AI cannot write code wrong? Is because, well, it can. You look at tools and products, even if they are good today, in the past 6 months of all of this blowing up, imagine what will happen in another 4 or 5 years. You can hold an eternally pessimistic view, but that's usually not, at least that doesn't seem to be the trend right now. What has happened is fundamentally there are certain early jobs, I would say, that are definitely impacted. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say there is no impact. However, the biggest impact is not on the direct job when you graduate out of the college. The impact comes if you don't know about these tools and are staying in a bubble and everybody else does and is able to do the job faster. There is always a market for, let's say, developers who can do good job, and if augmented by AI, they can do good to great very quickly. Second part of the conversation is there are a lot of newer roles emerging. There's a ton of information about vibe coding. If you don't know what that is, using large language models to build system softwares essentially. I'll show some of the vibe coding tools today live. Then if you have, what else? What other scenarios you have? So moving from vibe coding, early jobs, those sort of things are, significantly get impacted. But if you are aware of these things, well, there is a definite potential. What are the new roles? There's definitely a clear prompt engineering world coming out. There's also deeper needs to have people who can work with small language models, large language models, understand these architectures, which are really deep data science stuff. In fact, because most of the time, even when you are working as a data scientist, you're not really modeling. It has been proven before. So developing frameworks that where large language models fit in is completely new. There's most of these libraries haven't factored this work in. Doing optimizations, arranging the systems, doing product engineering, supporting products, supporting sales demos. There's a lot of different roles around rapid experimentation as well cooking up. The number of UI examples that can be cooked is is incredibly high. Again, we'll see some of them. So from a learning exploration perspective, it's very important to be aware about this. Finally, DevOps and configurations. I think most of DevOps, in my view, is a lot of tooling and workflows and debugging and grounding it into data. So it can generate CI/CD YAMLs, it can do GitHub Actions, Circle CI, you can write Docker files, do health checkups. There are MCP servers for Kubernetes, Terraform, infra as a code snipping, monitoring, logging, everything. You can just, leverage large language models to speeden up your workload. Again, it's code just on a different side. Use cases. I'm not going to read through them, but there's a bunch of auto-generate scenarios across the board. Feel free to check them out and try it yourself. What are some limitations? I think a few important points to understand is code might compile but might not be logically correct. It could be incorrect to say that it only knows a piece of functionalities. Again, this is something that can be fixed. A lot of times, or in most scenarios, I would suggest human reviews for security and correctness. And if there are anything which are, let's say, domain centric, for instance, insurance, healthcare, where there's a lot of domain centricity involved, you kind of have rules which are specific to the kind of business and the line of business you're dealing with, these challenges could crop up in that space. So I would say those limitations will be conquered pretty soon by mankind. What are the next steps? Let's just dive in. Let's see stuff in action, integrate. How do we bring it into VS Code? Let's look at the toolchain. All right. So the first tool in this space is called Bolt.new. And this belongs to a class of applications that can help you do UI, prototype apps, even build full-fledged front ends. Now, this might not be something that most people would want to start with, but if you give it a shot, you'll be really surprised. I'm going to walk through a bunch of apps in this like this, but let me just give an overview of how these work so that the others are more easier. So let's say you have a product idea or a project, or you're trying to do a demo, or you're trying to stitch together a screen, whether it's a web or a mobile app. There's a lot of different stack like Vue, White, Next, Native, Quick, React, TypeScript, etc., etc. Or you can just bring your Figma in here and it would automatically process Figma and generate the UI components for you, which is a really powerful feature if you think about it, that from a UI design to workable UI app, or I would not, maybe not integrated with the backend. There's usually some time spent like couple of weeks from Figma to this state, and there's a lot of handover happening. So there's a designer passes over the assets, the color gradients are not matching, things needs to be stitched in a custom CSS and things like that. This tool can take all of that, process it, and just get started. So I'm gonna give it a shot and say that I have an idea where I want to build a personal finance tracker. This should allow users to be able to capture their expenses, see savings from bank accounts. What else? Categorize expenses, organize data by time, add in family members and other elements. Now what I have entered here is something called as a prompt. What is prompt? That's a conversation for another day, but you can just click on this, either copy this or click on enhance prompt. What enhance prompt will do is just make it more detailed. I'm guessing it would automatically be doing this in the backend, but the way this has worked is it has just broken down this requirement. Again, not a lot of people are in the market building finance apps like this, but this is just an example. That said, there are some limitations of free account, like 150 daily tokens. If you're prototyping, this is way more than enough. Like processing all of this is just giving consume like 6,000 tokens, so 150 is way too high. You can get to more paid tiers to get more state, but now is the fun. It has already started to write a lot of boilerplate code, and very quickly it has started to give you different a complete folder structure. So if you see, there's a source, there's git ignore, the standard stuff. Within the source there are different components, router is having different interfaces, main layout has a bunch of options, and it's just creating these components dynamically, generating forms after forms. Now why is this useful? It is not really taking away a job per se. If your job was just to execute a task, then yes, it could. But what it is giving front end developers or builders is essentially quick fire prototyping. Now, unless and until you are in a very large scale enterprise where your UIs are consumed by millions and billions of users, probably not billions, millions, then most cases you're building some sort of a UI to support a business customer. So that's where frameworks like Streamlit became really popular, specifically in the data analytics space. Something like this can just squash that up. You don't need Streamlit because what you can get is a real UI, not just a workable notion of a UI. This is real components which you can take, give it to a front end developer. So that's the idea, and it is just going on. It's probably added packed in too much functionality for it to do, but eventually what happens is it goes to a state and it gives you a preview. While it does that, I'm going to show you more details to show how it is helping developers. So on the left hand side you have your chat, you have a lot of settings. Obviously it's like an editor, so you can do a dark theme, you can do a light theme. This is an editor, so you can do text wrapping, you can have your team members created, you can add more tokens. I signed up for something, so I have some extra million tokens, 1 million token, etc. You can bring a lot of different apps, which is what I was trying to get to. So you can take this UI, deploy to Netlify if you have your own custom domain, your own whatever deployment ecosystem if you're using in Netlify, which is very popular. Supabase is again extremely relevant if you are trying to do backend based stuff, if you're trying to do authentication and stuff like that. It's like a pass for purpose built. Obviously, Figma is designed. So think about it that people are saying that SaaS is dead. This is why it is arguably going to be dead, maybe because builders, developers who have an idea can build a UI app. So if you're a backend person, you already know what that is. So you can use this to solve all the front end needs. If you are a front end person, you can still come here, adapt, integrate it with Super and Base and work like that. Figma and Git are there, and then there are a lot of preview features like it can do a diff, it can do a dynamic reasoning, which is more paid plan feature. It has more elements like prompt injection, like you can really define a project specific prompt. So there's a system prompt and then there's a project prompt. So for this project, I want a certain design scheme, I want some sort of a layout. I can do that here. Sorry. Yeah, sure, backups and all of this can be very easily accessed. Okay, Bolt is working. It's really taking a lot of time to execute this. And by the way, the number of tokens are still there. Once it is done, integrations will be up. I can also export it, like download the whole project just right off the bat and give this to my front end developer. If I am a product manager, I can use this to design it. There are a little bit of features available here. For example, you can set the visibility to public, you cannot set it to secret. There's a UI that it extends, things like that. And what else is there in there to one? I think the subscription. Yeah, okay. Yeah. How does the pricing work? You can do an annual billing or monthly billing. So 10 million tokens is something like 12, $20 a month, which is actually not bad. I have a lot of tokens because I participated in some sort of a survey they had. So for all sorts of experiments, this is really good. Simple, what are tokens? Tokens are basically things that LLMs consumed, and token rollover do not happens, etc., etc. This is basic pricing related stuff. Now this is going to take a while to finish, so I'm going to move over to a different tool in a similar category, just so that we are able to save some time. Okay, next tool, it's called Lovable. What is Lovable? Very similar to what we just saw. So there's a lot of different websites that people have built. How about we pick the first one, which is cryptocurrency based? So somebody built an interface for a crypto dashboard. Now this has a really neat UI integration where they have all the integrated view for something like, I think this is trading view, and then there's a Bitcoin performance tracking happening here. So this is like a crypto dashboard, which is very interesting. I can change the symbol to, let's say, Ethereum here. Ethereum, yeah. Okay, it did not update itself, but again, the chart updated, but maybe it's not that dynamic as we expected it to be. So Lovable is basically a distant cousin to Bolt, I feel. I first found Bolt, but you can pretty much do the same stuff in Lovable. I want to create personal finance app and it's just gonna give me a login prompt and all that. But as you can see, a lot of people have published interesting ideas. There's a trading template, there's a market mosaic. For example, what does this say? This is a forklift navigator, which I have no idea what it is. It's in some different languages. This is like a very well thought through library, even if it's in a language which I don't know. But it's like a dashboard, then there are different pages, there's operators, tasks. You can do things here, you can edit, assign. It seems to be a whole workflow system, which is quite neat. I have not seen this extensive UIs built using tools like this. What else is there? Yeah, so you can cook up a lot of different ideas and demo using it. Like somebody has done your personal AI engine. This seems to be some sort of a cortex, which is a second brain idea where you put in your notes, thoughts, ideas, etc. there. So yeah, this let's see, it worked. Yeah, okay. While so this is the personal AI engine. Somebody has given it a nice little theme, look and feel. It's a very standard, good looking UI for anything boilerplate. So the world of pre-existing templates where somebody takes and buys a templates and then puts downloads, I think those are gone. You can just use tools like this to prototype your idea. Okay, let's quickly go over to Bolt to just finish the thought process. So this is what Bolt came up with. It's basically I can register a, I can go to dashboard, I can look at expense, I can add, let's say, $1,000 trading strategies, whatever, save expense. It even has a category function, receipt, and all of that. So I put in here, there's a budgeting option, there's account option, there's reports, which is clearly not updated. Yeah, you can iterate over it again. It's not in first go, it's a done deal. You can obviously choose to do a lot of stuff here. You can dynamically say, you can click through this and see this. You can make more changes here, but I think you get the drill. The point here is that really quickly, for example, I'll maybe show a feature. Let's say I want to change this and give this all of the content in the site is in USD. I need it to be in INR. That's, I want to make a global change by just past a selection. So this button here helped me select something. So I selected the total balance so that just it sees through something like this. So it's gonna go and update the code, and again all of the data references would be updated. Probably logos would also be updated. All right. So this is the first category of tool where I think there is a lot of movement happening, and this is geared towards, I would say now, to quickly prototyping ideas, building boilerplate starting points to your project. In the past 3 months of me observing this space, it has literally exploded. So it is extremely possible that okay, it did not, it still is dollars, but maybe when I put a new expense, it might have been able to change the icon. No, it did not. Anyway, those bugs issues can be resolved pretty easily. The point is, in 3 months, this has grown to a substantially good state. And as we are seeing improvements in LLM, this is just going to extend. That's all I can say. Let me move on to a second category of tools, something like which are coding assistant. So this is GitHub Copilot. I'm sure there are different sorts of copilots that you have heard of. This is literally that AI that builds with you. I'll show how this works live in few minutes. Before I just want to show over a couple of other tools that are more interesting in this space. Let's say kubectl MCP server. Yeah, this copilot essentially there are two modes. You can use it to suggest code, be aware of your code base. Additionally, you can get into the agent mode, which is mostly assistive development, which again, as I've been repeating, we'll see for it live. Next up are language models which are specifically for it, which is something I talked about earlier in this video. If you see, this is a model called Gorilla, which is connected with lots of APIs. So this model is aware of lots of different, let me see the documentation, what APIs it has been fed. But last I remember, it has most of like things like Kubernetes. Yeah, let's see here. Sorry, I moved to a different space. There is, yeah. So it supports 1500 APIs, as you can see here. Use for CLI tool 1500 Kubernetes, AWS, GCP, etc. And what they have done is they have essentially trained a large language model which is just designed for this purpose. It knows so many different APIs that just accessing this can solve a bunch of problems upfront for you. So imagine putting an MCP server, which is more like a USB hub. If you haven't heard of the term, next video on, I'm gonna go full on onto MCP and what that is, how do you build around it, and all that. But Gorilla is an LLM where you use it because it is aware of all of those different things. So if you are a DevOps engineer, it just is aware of your core tools, cloud frameworks, Terraform, things like that. So it's really efficient in terms of the options it gives you out of the box of awareness of different APIs. How do you use it? It has I think a very straightforward installation instruction. I believe I've done yeah, here is a Google Colab demo. You can just use Gorilla CLI, and this CLI is just gonna give you everything that you want to use. You can also use OpenAI functions. There are other quick starter guides that you can look at it. But again, the point is that this knows so much that you'll be surprised as to how easy it is to access some sort of information. If you don't know a syntax, this is totally for you. All right. I'm not gonna go. And one last mention, I think this is something like a kubectl MCP server. So what is this? Let's just, I believe this is from Rohit. Yeah, Rohit Gumre is a DevRel whom I've met couple of times in the past. So this is basically an MCP tool, and what happens is if you have, let's say, a GPT or a Claude, you can hook this MCP there, and it will know kubectl. So one approach is Gorilla LLM, where you can use it to access all of this. Other is to have access to different MCP tools like this. All right. Now moving on and shifting gears, what I'm going to show you is now some code and just show you how different kind of methods exist for you to support your day-to-day development. So this is a very simple Jupyter notebook. It has just basics of Python indexing, and let's see if it runs. Yeah, sure. Where does it print it? Yeah, it printed. So if you print some sort of an error. So yeah, this is what is happening here. Now this is a tutorial notebook, which is why you have some sort of errors also simulated. Let's say, for instance, I open GitHub chat and this is a Visual Studio. Sorry, this is not Visual Studio, this is PyCharm. I'm using PyCharm here. So this is PyCharm and I have a couple of options. I can go to the GitHub Copilot regular mode, which is more like it'll start suggesting completions in different places, or I can get into agent mode, and agent mode will essentially work with me side by side. You can select models. Right now I have selected Claude 3.5. You can do GPT 4.1, 4.0, whatever, and you can add a context. So the context can be all open files, or you can do this. So for example, I added this as a context and asked what are the errors in the notebook, suggest corrections. This is very simple, but it just works across the board. It doesn't really matter. Now, something that I have noticed in my experiment is if you're working with popular languages like TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Java, these code completions are really good. They're surprisingly awesome for Python and that ecosystem. Beyond those workflows, like if you go into something like Rust, I think there's still a path for them to take. So it's going to take a few time, like it looking at the notebook content and errors. I noticed a few issues that needs corrections. It's probably gonna take some time. Okay, it realized that there's a code that deliberately demonstrate a type error, which is what this is, and then there's some sort of an indexing error, which is my list, and this is also one. So it's gonna go and edit it and tell me essentially to accept that edit in a nutshell. So let's just give it few moments, and once it is up, it that's how it works. So maybe I'll just hold this in parallel and start another tool. Don't want to overwhelm, but let's say we open warp. So warp is my terminal, and okay, I think it, yeah, you see here the green one, it showed me a diff and I can accept or reject. So there are few suggestions that it has made. One, no, only one. No, two places. So it has fixed both the places because those were intentional errors. So I'm gonna discard all of them. All right. So this is how this tool works. Now, another popular way to do the same thing is if you have a Chat GPT desktop, what will happen is you can use the mode from Chat GPT, and where it says work with apps. I can do work with apps and add PyCharm. And basically it just picks the entire editor, and I can ask what am I doing in this project. It will give me a summary by reading through the code. So what is happening here is that let's say you have two monitors, you can open ChatGPT in another and your IDE as a main window and keep scanning your code base by this. So it's giving a summary of what it is, different, like this is really a course. It's basically if you're building a course, this could be module 1 Python basics for financial applications. That's exactly what this is. Again, there is nothing simulated here, it's all live in front of you guys. So it is very active in that sense. And again, as I was demonstrating with GitHub Copilot, it has the same ability. It can get into the code, it can make suggestions, it can override, but this needs the desktop app for ChatGPT. The third way of working on this is one of my favorites, which is Claude Code. So when you hit Claude, okay, sorry, I need to get into the folder, documents, GitHub, financial, yeah, right, yeah, all right. Now, what has happened is Claude, I'd already used Claude here once before. Maybe I'll do that again. If I do slash init, it'll initialize a new file called Claude or something, claude.md. Basically what it does at this stage is it scans this entire code base, processes, it's going to give me The cost at the end of it, all of this, probably it will cost me like $1 or half a dollar or something. But what it is doing right now is it is scanning the entire code base, building a list of Claude to work. So essentially, it's hooking itself on to the project folder. This is very similar like Git, where Git uses configurations or any tool. So it has created a detailed note. So if I just press yes, it's gonna write a file. I hopefully you will see a Claude.file here. So now this file is completely I'll see the cost part of it, but what this file does is for Claude Code is a CLI. Now it scanned your code base and it has all the different information. What is the development environment? What are the notebook areas? What are the operations? Some sort of architecture notes. Oh, it basically has looked at it overall. I can go into each folder, like I can point it a certain notebook, I can ask it questions, and it's gonna keep doing it. If I do a quit, it will show me the amount of money spent. So this 30 cents or something, few rupees. Total duration was 50 seconds. So Claude is working. Now imagine something like this. If you have Claude assisting you and your Claude.markdown is just constantly overwritten by Claude all the time as you work with it, this can be part of your Git. And when you share this with some other developer, the code base, they have shared access. So in a way, a live commentary, a live timeline of what has happened in the code base can be maintained over there, which is what is just amazing in this case. And again, I can go in and ask questions, things like that. So these are assistants. Now if you go into something like VS Code and look at AI assistants, you probably will have the same access. Like I was using PyCharm, most people would not. So yeah, if you go and see AI assistant, there would be, I'm pretty sure, a lot of AI assistants here. Tabline is very beautiful. Cloud Black Box is also nice. I've done videos around all of them. So you can use whichever AI assistant you want. Like for example, this is a testing assistant, as I was saying. So this essentially is really clear on, I'll show you the product as well. It's really clear on generating use cases. The whole intent is do the development and generate use cases. So sorry, unit test cases. So it does unit test cases, API testing, and obviously integration testing as well. You don't need to do any code, like there's no configuration required in this, so you can generate this, integrate this with your GitHub actions, and things like this will work. Then you have a lot of different, like JetBrains has a coding assistant of their own. Claude AI assistant can be installed, which is more like running side by side. There's a lot of popular ones. Some of free ones are usually more popular. Paid ones are give you more access and control. If you don't want to pay, it's good to work with two, three of them. The only limitation with free ones are essentially that you have very small access to it, will not access your entire code base. It will probably look at a certain number of lines and all that, which can be difficult in some scenarios. If it only knows limited number of lines of your code base, there's a limit, then it will not know the entire logic. So it can be giving you logical errors. That's kind of part of the job. So I think this is what I'll want to take a pause at and say that there has been a lot of improvement in the space. And again, more tools keep coming every now and then. But directionally, there are assistants that can make your life easy. So rather than breaking our heads on Google, on Stack, in fact, Stack Overflow searches have declined. That's a proven data point. We will be able to use these assistants to optimize our life. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have liked this video, please give a thumbs up, share this with your friends, colleagues within your organization. Subscribe if you have not. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.